Hey man, before you ever open your mouth, long before you offer a greeting, and long before you decide what version of yourself you want the world to see, she's already studying you in ways you won't notice. Not because she's judgmental, not because she's shallow, but because her mind works in layers you can't see. She doesn't wait for words to guide her impression. She reads the energy you carry, the way your presence enters a space, the emotional signature you leave behind without trying. Men think attraction starts with conversation. Women know it starts in the silence before the conversation ever begins. She is scanning whether you walk through life like someone who belongs in his own skin or someone still trying to find a place where he fits. And in those first quiet moments before anything is said, she has already formed a story about who you are. What catches her attention first is not your height, your jawline, your clothes, or anything as superficial as most men imagine. It's the way your presence settles into the environment. Some men enter a room like they're apologizing for being alive, shoulders tight, eyes uncertain, energy pulled inward. Others overcompensate and walk in as if they're performing confidence for an audience. But there is a third type, the rare type, the one she actually pays attention to. A man who doesn't need to prove anything. He isn't shrinking, he isn't posturing, he's simply there, steady, grounded, unbothered by the need to impress. That kind of presence is felt long before it's seen, and before you say a word, she already knows whether she should relax around you, guard herself, or quietly observe what you're made of. Then comes the moment where her attention moves toward your eyes, not the color, not the shape, but the story behind them. Eyes that dart around the room reveal a man who hasn't yet settled into himself. Eyes that scan her body too quickly reveal a man driven more by impulse than intention. Eyes that avoid contact entirely reveal a man still wrestling with his own insecurities. But the eyes that stay calm, the eyes that acknowledge her without grasping, the eyes that see without taking, these are the ones that make her pause. Because eyes like that belong to a man who isn't chasing reassurance. He isn't looking for something to complete him. He's simply noticing the world with a kind of quiet certainty. And that certainty pulls her curiosity in a way words never could. She also feels the emotional temperature around you. That invisible atmosphere you carry with you everywhere. Some men walk around as if they're weighed down by unresolved frustration, and she senses it instantly. Others move through life with a kind of emotional emptiness that makes them feel disconnected from their own experiences. But the man who carries calm intensity, the kind that doesn't demand attention but naturally draws it, creates a shift she cannot ignore. His presence feels balanced, not rigid, focused, not forceful. That emotional steadiness creates an internal safety within her, long before she decides whether she's attracted or not. Before you speak, she already knows if your world feels chaotic, or if she just stepped into the orbit of someone who runs on inner stability. Next, she notices the way you move, not the style, but the intention. Every step reveals something about you. Men who rush through life carry the scent of desperation. Men who drag their feet carry the scent of surrender. But men who move with deliberate ease communicate something far more compelling: self-trust. When you walk toward her, or simply through the room without racing or hesitating, without showing need or fear, she feels that rhythm. It tells her you're not reacting to life, you're leading yourself through it. That alone, before any words are spoken, changes how she sees you. Not as someone trying to win her attention, but as someone who knows how to guide his own path. Then there's the way you claim space, not in a loud, dominant way. That's insecurity in disguise. She notices whether you seem uncomfortable in your own body, or whether you inhabit yourself fully. A man who stands small, who fidgets, who shifts constantly, communicates that he's fighting an internal battle. But a man who simply exists with ease, feet planted, shoulders relaxed, breath steady, communicates something she rarely sees. A man who belongs to himself. That is the kind of man she watches more closely. Because women don't want a man who constantly needs reassurance that he deserves to be here. They want a man whose existence already answers that question. Before you speak, she's also paying attention to the silence between you, because silence tells her more truth than conversation ever will. A man who panics in silence reveals that he uses words as a shield, not as a bridge. A man who rushes to fill every gap reveals that he can't sit with his own thoughts, let alone hers. But a man who lets silence exist, who doesn't treat it as something to escape, that man communicates emotional control. He isn't afraid of stillness. He isn't afraid of tension. He isn't afraid of the moment. There is something deeply attractive about someone who doesn't crumble in the quiet. It makes her feel like she's standing in front of someone steady, someone who doesn't need external noise to feel whole. What surprises men the most is how quickly she perceives your self-respect. She notices it in the smallest details: how you stand, how you breathe, how you adjust your clothes, how you carry your attention. She notices whether you're trying to impress or whether you're simply allowing yourself to be seen. She notices whether your approval of yourself comes from within or whether you're fishing for hers. A man with self-respect doesn't shrink. He doesn't perform. He doesn't rush to prove worth. He simply shows up as he is, and that honesty, that lack of desperation, makes her feel something deeper than admiration. It makes her curious. She also watches how the world reacts to you. Not because she cares about status, but because social energy reveals more truth about a person than words ever could. Do people smile when they see you? Do they look relieved? Do they look cautious? Do they ignore you entirely? She reads all of this instantly. If others naturally relax around you, she feels a subtle trust forming. If others tense around you, she becomes alert. If people make space for you without you forcing anything, she reads it as social competence. And all of this happens before you've even said hello. And finally, before you say your very first word, she notices whether your presence feels like a request or an invitation. There are men who walk into a moment asking for something: attention, validation, approval, significance. Their energy feels hungry. Women sense that hunger instantly. And then there are men whose presence feels like an open door, not demanding, not chasing, not forcing, simply offering. An invitation is quiet but powerful. It says, you're free to step into my world if it aligns with yours. I'm here, but I'm not waiting. That energy is irresistible because it suggests confidence without arrogance, openness without need, and it tells her, without speaking, that you're a man whose value doesn't depend on her reaction. What pulls her in next, often without her even realizing it, is the way you hold yourself when you're not doing anything at all. The moment right before you speak reveals whether you're centered or scattered, whether you move from your own convictions or from nervous anticipation. Men underestimate how obvious this moment is, but women feel it instantly. If your body is tense, if your breath is shallow, if your energy pushes outward instead of settling inward, she reads it as a man still wrestling with himself. But the man who pauses before he speaks, not because he's searching for approval, but because he isn't rushing to escape the moment, he makes her feel something deeper. It shows her you're not in a hurry to prove yourself. You're not trying to win the moment. You're simply letting the moment unfold. And that effortless patience makes her wonder what else about you has that kind of quiet strength. As the seconds pass, she also starts sensing your relationship with discomfort. Not through any dramatic expression, but through the subtle micro-signals, the calmness in your face, the steadiness in your hands, the lack of frantic movement in your posture. If you crumble in small discomfort, she instinctively knows you'll crumble in big ones. But if you remain steady when there's tension in the air, if your breathing remains slow, if your body remains relaxed, if your energy doesn't spike into anxiety, she recognizes something many men don't know they're communicating: capacity. The capacity to remain composed when life becomes unpredictable, the capacity to handle the unknown without needing reassurance, the capacity to be present even when emotions rise. That silent calmness earns more respect than any witty line ever could. Then, almost unconsciously, she begins noticing whether you're someone who leads yourself or someone who waits for life to lead you. It shows up in the way you stand, in how you look around, in the way you position your body in the space between you and her. Men who are lost tend to let the environment dictate their emotions. They react to everything. But a man who walks into a room with direction, even if he isn't heading anywhere in particular, radiates a kind of internal compass. She sees it when you take your time instead of stumbling forward. She sees it when you acknowledge the world without being swallowed by it. She sees it when your presence feels consistent instead of bending with every shift of attention. That sense of direction creates a gravity of its own, not forceful, not dominating, just steady enough that she instinctively pays closer attention. And before you speak, she also studies how connected you are to your own body, because your body tells the truth long before your words do. A man disconnected from himself looks uncomfortable in his own skin. His movements are jerky, his posture collapses inward, his gestures lack intention. A man overcompensating tries to look bigger, stronger, louder than he is, and she can feel the insecurity behind it. But a man who moves with alignment, whose gestures match his energy, whose posture rises but doesn't inflate, whose breathing remains slow and grounded, that man communicates authenticity. She feels like she's meeting the real version of you, not a performance created to impress her. Authenticity is rare, and she notices it instantly. What surprises her most is that sometimes she feels drawn to you before she even knows if she finds you attractive physically. Attraction for women begins with emotional resonance, not appearance. She pays attention to the way your energy lands inside her, whether it brings tension or ease, whether it feels heavy or intriguing, whether it awakens curiosity or caution. A man who walks in with grounded, self-contained energy creates an emotional pull that bypasses logic. She may not know why she's paying attention to you, why she keeps glancing your way, or why her mind is quieting down when you're near, but she feels it. You didn't say a word, yet her nervous system responded to your presence, and that response is far more powerful than anything you could have said in those first few moments. She also becomes aware of how you handle the attention of others around you, not whether you're the center of the room, but how you behave when people glance at you, acknowledge you, or greet you. A man who desperately seeks validation from others reveals a void. A man who recoils from attention reveals discomfort with himself. But a man who receives attention lightly, without clinging to it or avoiding it, communicates emotional autonomy. She sees the ease with which you nod, the calmness in your reactions, the way you neither shrink nor inflate in response to others. This tells her you don't outsource your self-worth to the world, and any man who doesn't outsource his worth stands out in a way she can't ignore. Before you speak, she also observes your emotional containment, the quiet ability to feel without spilling, to think without spiraling, to be present without overwhelming the moment with your internal noise. She notices the difference between a man whose inner world leaks out in every gesture and sigh, and a man whose inner world is deep but steady, visible through presence rather than through scattered emotion. Containment doesn't mean suppression, it means structure. It means you know where your emotions belong. It means you're not asking her to carry what you haven't learned to hold. And that kind of emotional organization, even when unspoken, creates a sense of safety she rarely finds in men. She also senses whether you are genuinely in the moment or trapped in your head. Men who live in their thoughts tend to disconnect from what's actually happening right in front of them. Their attention jumps to worries, overthinking, imagined scenarios, and self-critique. Women feel this distance like a cold breeze, but a man who is fully present, whose eyes settle naturally, whose body language responds to the reality around him, not the story in his mind, he changes the atmosphere. His presence feels grounded, not scattered, intentional, not nervous, awake, not distracted, and long before you say anything, she already knows if she's interacting with a man who lives consciously or a man who's sleepwalking through his own life. She pays attention to the way the space reacts to you, because environments tell the truth. Men try to hide. Some men carry tension into every room and make others tighten without knowing why. Others carry anxious energy that forces everyone around them to adjust. But a man whose energy harmonizes with the environment signals rare emotional balance. People unconsciously make space for him. Conversations slow down when he enters. The atmosphere shifts into something calmer. She sees how others respond to your presence, and without thinking, she begins associating your energy with stability. Before you utter a word, the room itself has already spoken on your behalf. And the final thing she notices, the thing that shapes everything that follows, is whether your presence feels like something she must earn or something you're giving away for free. Men who throw their attention at every woman communicate no value, no standards, no selectiveness, but men whose energy is deliberate, offered rather than scattered, create a sensation she doesn't feel often, the awareness that your attention means something. You're not withholding, you're discerning. You're not arrogant, you're selective. And that selectiveness makes her pay closer attention to you before you've even introduced yourself. It creates tension, curiosity, and possibility all at once, because a man who values his presence teaches her to value it too. As she keeps observing you, something subtle begins to shift inside her. Not attraction, not longing, but curiosity. Curiosity is the doorway to everything that comes later, and it starts forming when she sees a man who doesn't rush to prove himself. She notices the steadiness in your gestures, the calm pace of your breathing, the sense that you're not waiting for anyone to validate your existence. That alone creates a small spark inside her mind. It makes her wonder what shaped you, what built this quiet confidence, what experiences turned you into someone who doesn't crumble under the weight of first impressions. Men think they need to speak to be interesting. Women know that a man's silence often reveals more than his words, and when your silence feels grounded rather than insecure, she begins leaning inward emotionally, not because you're trying to pull her, but because your presence doesn't demand anything from her. Then, almost unconsciously, she begins paying attention to how you respond to the world around you. Not in big moments, but in the tiny interactions that most people overlook. She watches the way you step aside for someone without losing your sense of direction, the way you greet someone casually without shrinking or trying to impress, the way you adjust your posture when someone bumps into you but don't show irritation or fragility. These small reactions tell her more about your emotional maturity than anything you could say. A man who navigates life with grace, even in the smallest gestures, communicates strength in a way words could never match. She starts to see you, not as a man trying to stand out, but as a man who naturally stands apart. What draws her attention next is something men rarely think about: the emotional distance you maintain within yourself. She notices whether you're someone who spills too much energy into the world, seeking attention, validation, or approval, or someone who keeps part of himself anchored inward. The men who spill themselves dry are instantly predictable, but the man who stays connected to his inner world, who doesn't offer full access to his energy the moment he meets someone, becomes intriguing on a level she can't easily explain. It's not mystery, it's restraint. The restraint of a man who knows his worth. The restraint of someone who doesn't hand out emotional access without discernment. And that restraint sends a message she feels rather than hears. You won't chase what doesn't align with you. She also pays attention to how balanced your energy is, whether you lean too far into intensity or too far into detachment. A man who gives off too much intensity feels overwhelming, like he's trying to force the moment into something it isn't ready to be. A man who is too detached feels absent, uninterested, hollow. But the man who walks the middle path, present enough to be felt, distant enough to maintain control, creates a tension she finds deeply attractive. It makes her feel like she's interacting with someone who isn't governed by impulse, someone who won't collapse into emotion nor run from it, someone who holds his center regardless of who stands in front of him. That balance makes her feel something she rarely feels in today's world: steadiness. At this point, she starts noticing the rhythm of your presence, the subtle emotional pacing that reveals how comfortable you are with yourself. Some men rush through their movements as if they fear being seen too clearly. Others drag their energy as though they've given up on impressing anyone, including themselves. But a man who moves with natural rhythm, who doesn't rush or hesitate, who stays aligned with his own pace, rather than the world's expectations, radiates authenticity. She feels like she's witnessing a man who isn't influenced by the noise around him, who isn't trying to match the world's tempo, who sets his own tone and lets everything else adjust. That kind of rhythm doesn't just catch her attention, it settles into her memory. And while all of this is happening, she also registers the emotional boundaries you hold. Not the ones you talk about, but the ones that show up in micro moments. She can see when a man is too eager, leaning forward emotionally before she's even offered anything of substance. That eagerness signals a dangerous truth. He values her more than he values his own presence. But the man who maintains internal boundaries, who doesn't give away his energy too quickly, who doesn't soften too soon, who doesn't offer instant emotional access, communicates something different. He shows her that he doesn't lose himself when he becomes interested. He shows her he can want someone without making them the center of his world. And that restraint, that emotional sovereignty, creates a feeling inside her she rarely admits: respect. She also notices how you exist within your own silence. Men mistakenly think silence is empty, that it's a pause waiting to be filled with words. But she knows silence is a language of its own. There is silence that suffocates, silence that exposes insecurity, silence that demands validation. And then there is silence that feels like presence, the kind where a man doesn't need noise to feel significant. When your silence feels intentional rather than accidental, when it carries weight instead of desperation, she interprets it as emotional mastery. You're not silent because you're nervous. You're silent because you're not rushing to be understood. You're letting the moment come to you instead of chasing it. And that kind of silence draws her in more powerfully than any speech ever could. As her attention deepens, she becomes aware of something men almost never think about: the way you transition between moments. She watches how you shift your gaze, how you reset your posture, how you take a step, how you respond to subtle changes in the environment. Men who lack inner stability make abrupt transitions. They fidget, shake, laugh nervously, break eye contact too quickly, or rush into the next gesture. But a man with emotional consistency transitions smoothly, almost effortlessly, as if he trusts the flow of the moment. These transitions reveal your relationship with uncertainty, and when she sees that you can move through uncertainty with calmness instead of panic, she feels an internal pull towards you that she has no reason to explain out loud. Before you speak, she also senses how deeply you're connected to your own purpose, not your career, not your ambitions, but your internal direction. The sense that you're living life with intention rather than drifting through it. When a man has no direction, it shows in his posture, in his gestures, in the way his eyes move through the room. But the man who has a quiet purpose, even if no one knows what it is, radiates a grounded presence. He doesn't need the moment to define him. He doesn't need attention to feel alive. He stands in front of her with the ease of someone who knows exactly who he is and exactly where he's going. That sense of purpose, even unspoken, becomes one of the most attractive things she notices before you ever say hello. Finally, she begins evaluating how you hold your masculine frame, not in the superficial internet buzzword way, but in the real emotional sense. Frame is not a posture or an attitude, it's the psychological container you bring into the moment. She feels whether your presence calms her or agitates her, whether your energy feels stable or scattered, whether the interaction feels guided or floating. A man who holds his frame naturally draws her into his world without force, without performance, without manipulation. It makes her feel like she's standing in front of someone who knows what he stands for, someone who won't collapse under emotional pressure, someone who sees her clearly without losing himself in the process. And by the time you finally speak, she already knows whether she's dealing with a man she respects or a man she forgets. What begins to intrigue her next is the emotional tone underneath your neutrality, that subtle undercurrent of feeling that exists even when your face is calm and your gestures are controlled. She studies how your presence lands emotionally. Some men appear neutral, but radiate suppressed tension, and women feel it like a pressure in the air. Others appear friendly, but carry a hidden neediness that gives them away. But a man who is truly settled, who doesn't mask discomfort with forced expressions, who doesn't hide insecurity behind exaggerated confidence, he gives off a kind of emotional clarity that is impossible for her to ignore. It creates a sensation of, this man knows himself long before you introduce yourself. And that sensation changes the entire dynamic, because now you're not just another man she's evaluating, you become someone whose inner world she wants to understand. By now she's also watching how your attention behaves. Attention is one of the deepest indicators of a man's emotional maturity, and she notices whether yours is chaotic or controlled. Men who stare too intensely often reveal hunger. Men who avoid eye contact entirely reveal fear. But men who offer attention in measured doses, steady, present, but not demanding, shift something inside her. She feels like you're not trying to consume her presence, but you're also not trying to escape it. You're simply acknowledging what's in front of you while staying rooted in yourself. That balance makes the moment feel safe and charged at the same time. It tells her you're not chasing connection, you're evaluating it. And that shift in power dynamics is something she detects instantly. She also begins noticing whether your presence creates expansion or contraction inside her. Some men bring a tightness into the air. Their nervousness becomes contagious. Their insecurity becomes palpable. Their self-doubt makes her body tense without explanation. But the man who walks in with calm conviction produces a different response entirely. Her shoulders relax, her breathing slows, her guard softens, not because she trusts you yet, but because your energy doesn't force her into defensive mode. There's something about a man who doesn't bring chaos that feels rare. Most men push their emotions outward, asking others to deal with them, but the one who manages his inner world quietly gives her room to breathe, and that space is something she feels before she even realizes she's feeling it. Long before the first words come out of your mouth, she is already forming predictions about who you are in conflict, in intimacy, in stress, and in routine. Women do this instinctively. It's not conscious, but deeply intuitive. She imagines, without trying, how you would respond if someone disrespected you. She imagines whether you'd crumble when challenged, or stand grounded without aggression. She imagines whether you would lose yourself to emotion or remain the anchor when life becomes uncertain. These small imaginations guide her emotional compass, and they come entirely from your presence. You haven't proven anything yet. You haven't showcased your strength, but your energy has already begun writing a story she believes. She notices whether you seem like a man who carries his past with heaviness or with wisdom. Men who are weighed down by old wounds tend to enter interactions with emotional residue, subtle bitterness, cautiousness, or an unspoken plea for reassurance. Women feel this instantly because the energy is heavy, demanding, or unresolved. But a man who has lived through things and come out steadier, not weaker, brings a different texture to the moment. His presence feels grounded, not scarred. His silence feels thoughtful, not wounded. His posture feels earned, not defensive. She can't explain it, but she senses the difference between a man who's still running from his past and a man who has integrated it into his strength. She also becomes acutely aware of how you treat the moment itself. Some men rush, as if trying to skip ahead to whatever outcome they're hoping for. Others hesitate, as if waiting for the world to give them permission to act. But the man who respects the pace of the moment, who doesn't push it, doesn't avoid it, doesn't manipulate it, creates an emotional rhythm that feels natural. It tells her he isn't addicted to control. It tells her he trusts life enough to let it unfold without forcing it. That trust becomes its own form of confidence, one she feels more deeply than any bold statement or flashy gesture. Before you speak, she already knows whether you're a man who respects time or a man who is constantly fighting against it. Another thing she picks up on is your level of internal focus. Men who are overly self-aware to the point of self-consciousness leak insecurity with every gesture. Men who lack self-awareness entirely seem oblivious and emotionally clumsy. But the man whose awareness points inward without trapping him, the man who knows himself but doesn't obsess over himself, carries a quiet balance that feels refreshing. She notices whether your attention centers your reality or floats aimlessly. She sees whether you're grounded in your own mind or scattered across 1,000 thoughts. And before you speak, she already has a sense of whether you will be someone she can emotionally trust or someone she will need to emotionally manage. She also begins evaluating the emotional weight of your silence. Some silences feel cold, others feel anxious, and others feel empty, but the silence of a man who is secure feels different. It feels warm without being needy, calm without being indifferent, open without being exposed. This silence doesn't demand anything from her, and yet it invites her into a psychological space where she feels both seen and respected. Most men fear silence because they fear being misunderstood, but the man who can sit in silence without shrinking or performing communicates something deeper than charm ever could: peace. And peace in a man is a rare luxury in today's world. She's also noticing whether your presence carries emotional generosity, not the kind expressed through words or gestures, but the subtle sense that you're not consumed by yourself. Men who are trapped in their own insecurities can't make space for anyone else. Their entire presence revolves around their own fear. Fear of rejection, fear of judgment, fear of inadequacy. But a man who is emotionally full has room for others. He doesn't overextend, but he doesn't withdraw either. His presence feels spacious, like there is room for her to exist, without being evaluated or used as a mirror for his self-doubt. That emotional generosity feels like oxygen in a world suffocated by ego. And finally, before you open your mouth, she's already asking herself one silent question: would I feel more or less like myself around this man? This question guides her instincts more than appearance, more than charm, more than initial attraction. If your energy feels like it would shrink her, she retreats. If it feels like it would overwhelm her, she guards herself. But if your energy feels like it would challenge her in the right ways, soften her in the right places, expand her rather than confine her, she becomes open without even realizing she's opened. You haven't spoken yet, but the moment is already shifting. Because she's no longer observing you from a distance, she's beginning to imagine what it would feel like to be seen by you. As she continues to take you in, she becomes aware of whether you bring emotional noise or emotional clarity into the space. Some men, without meaning to, carry a storm with them, tension in their jaw, scattered attention in their eyes, an unsettled heaviness in their breathing. Women feel this instantly, and it shapes how safe they feel around a man, long before he introduces himself. But if your presence feels like a quiet clearing rather than a storm, if the moment seems to soften instead of tense when you arrive, she notices that too. It's not that you try to calm the space, It's that calmness is simply part of who you are, and that kind of energy doesn't just attract her, it disarms her in a way she didn't expect. She also evaluates the depth of your inner world without ever hearing your story. The way you stand, the way you breathe, the way your eyes settle, tells her whether you've lived through real things, whether you've learned from them, whether you've come out sharpened or softened. Men who haven't faced themselves display a kind of emotional emptiness, a lack of weight, a lack of lived experience. But a man with emotional depth carries a quiet intensity that is neither dark nor dramatic. It's simply real. Real in the way he acknowledges the moment. Real in the way he observes without judgment. Real in the way he exists without trying to create an image. That realness is rare, and she feels instinctively drawn to understand it. Another thing she senses before you speak is whether you are a man who reacts or a man who responds. A reactive man reveals himself in micro-expressions, a twitch of annoyance, a flicker of insecurity, a jerk of defensiveness. These reactions show her that his emotions lead him instead of him leading his emotions. But a man who responds, who processes the moment internally before letting it shape his expression, conveys a level of emotional intelligence that is deeply compelling. It makes her feel like she's standing before someone who won't collapse under pressure, someone who won't lash out when challenged, someone who won't break connection because of temporary discomfort. Response over reaction. She senses it instantly. She also takes note of how easily you allow the moment to unfold, without needing to manipulate it. Men who are impatient tend to push the interaction forward too quickly, trying to anticipate outcomes before they've even learned who she is. That kind of energy feels like pressure, and it immediately turns her instinct away. But a man who is patient with the moment, who doesn't rush, doesn't overstep, doesn't cling to possibilities, creates space for something natural to happen. His patience isn't passivity, it's strength held gracefully. It shows her he isn't driven by fear of losing her. He's guided by the truth that anything real cannot be rushed. She notices how you hold your emotions, not through suppression or avoidance, but through posture. Emotion leaks through the body long before it's expressed through words. A man overwhelmed by his feelings unknowingly compresses himself, tightened shoulders, shallow breaths, rapid blinking. But a man who holds sorrow, joy, curiosity, or even nervousness with steadiness communicates inner cohesion. He feels deeply, but he remains in control. He isn't ashamed of his emotional world, but he also doesn't hand it to strangers. Presence like that feels safe because it tells her she won't be swallowed by your emotional storms, nor left out in the cold of your emotional absence. You haven't spoken, but you've already shown her how you love. She also begins noticing how grounded your confidence is. Some men perform confidence the way actors perform roles, with exaggerated gestures, overly bold expressions, or forced charisma. Women sense the artificiality immediately, but confidence that comes from knowing yourself has a completely different texture. It's quieter, it's steadier. It doesn't try to be noticed, yet it's impossible to ignore. It shows up in how you stand, how you breathe, how you occupy silence, how you acknowledge others. Confidence like that doesn't overwhelm the space, it stabilizes it. She can feel when your certainty isn't a shield, but a foundation. And that is the kind of confidence she rarely encounters. She senses whether you are a man who seeks something from her, or a man who sees something in her. The first type brings hunger, an unspoken desire for validation, attention, affection, or approval. Even if he hides it well, she feels the emotional pull. The second type brings discernment, not desperation. He isn't evaluating her value. He's deciding whether this moment resonates with his own inner world. He doesn't need her to choose him. He's choosing whether this interaction aligns with who he is. That subtle shift in direction changes everything. It makes her feel like she's being seen, not pursued. And being seen is far more powerful than being chased. She also observes whether you carry a quiet edge, not arrogance, not aggression, but the grounded strength of a man who won't be shaped by the room he's in. An edge is the difference between a man who adapts to the moment and a man who gets absorbed by it. The man with an edge doesn't change his core just because someone attractive stands before him. He doesn't soften his truth for approval. He doesn't shrink his presence to avoid intimidation. His edge is steady, disciplined, intentional, and that edge tells her she's not dealing with a man who needs to be chosen, but a man who chooses with clarity. As she studies you in these unspoken moments, she also begins reflecting on her own emotional reaction, something she never admits. She notices whether her own heartbeat changes slightly, whether her breathing deepens, whether her body relaxes or straightens. She pays attention to how she feels around you, not just how she feels about you. Attraction for women begins in the nervous system, not the eyes, and if your presence shifts her internal state, even subtly, she becomes more attuned to everything you do next. She might not speak a word, but internally, something is already unfolding. And finally, before your first word ever reaches her ears, she concludes something silently. Whether you are a man who will affect her life, or a man who will disappear from her memory, she decides whether she should lean in emotionally, remain guarded, or let the moment pass. All of this happens before the high, before the introduction, before the conversation begins. Because she wasn't waiting for your words, she was reading the truth, your presence already revealed. And if that truth is steady, grounded, self-led, and emotionally contained, she doesn't just notice you, she remembers you.